Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Real Life Health Show. I have another great guest. This is Mark Huberman, and Mark is going to just blow your mind when you hear his story. Hello, Mark. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Paul. How's yourself?
Very good, very good. Mark, I've seen your videos and your interviews, and I'm so excited to speak to you. I'm a big advocate of just health in general. And how you doing? Tell us a little about yourself, because from your health view standpoint, and then we'll get into why you're so healthy. But how you doing? How old are you, and how's your health currently?
Well, I just turned 73 years young. I turned 73 on June 26th, and meaning I was born back in 1951. My parents were real pioneers in this, what we call today the whole food plant-based health movement. Back then, it was kind of vegetarian. Vegan wasn't even much of a concept in the early 1950s, but they were part of the original vegetarian movement, but were part of the natural hygiene movement, which was inspired by the writings of Dr. Herbert Shelton, the writings and lectures of Dr. Herbert Shelton, Dr. Gerald Benish, Dr. Chris Curcio, Dr. William Esser, and they were people that, like a lot of people, most people, my late great father used to say, most people don't worry about their health until after they've lost it. That was kind of the case with my parents. They had a number of health problems, and my father worked for a guy who was an ardent vegetarian who happened to be a member of the American Natural Hygiene Society, which is what the National Health Association was called in those days. And he told my father that there was a better way than the polio he was suffering, and the appendicitis and the thyroid problems my mother was suffering, and the bronchial asthma that my brother was suffering, and took him to see lecturers and by Dr. Benish and Dr. Shelton, who were in Cleveland at the time. And what is that magic sauce that gets some people to just kind of see the light and some people don't? It's often a health crisis, but even health crisis, I'm sure you know, there's plenty of people that have heart attacks and they go back to smoking. The same thing with lung cancer. They just can't break the pleasure trap. But for my parents, they were, open-minded, broad thinkers and that, and they thought this was the right thing to do. And so when I came along about 2, 3 years into their discovery of this lifestyle, they thought that a raw food Sheltonian diet was the optimal diet. That's what they raised me on. That's the path they set me on way back in 1951. And I really never looked back for 32 and a half years. In fact, during those 32 and a half years of growing up as a raw food vegan, um,
Did
I
you say
can't
for the
say I
first
can't
30?
say I ever met anybody like me.
Wow, did you say for the first 2 years of your life you were 100% raw food vegan?
I was a raw food vegan my entire life. The first 32 and a half years, I was raw food vegan. I stayed that way until I was 32 and a half years old when I just decided, am I doing this? Am I doing my raw food diet because I think it's necessary to maintain health, or that if I took the risk and introduced some cooked foods into this pure temple of mine, that something, God forbid, would happen. But I concluded that even the people that I respect a lot, Dr. Joel Furman, Dr. Alan Goldhammer, the Dr. Alec Burton, the leaders of our movement, none of them, while they all thought raw foods are great, none of them advocated a raw food diet as being necessary to sustain health. In fact, I think the better view, and it still is the view today, that it can be difficult to maintain weight, satiety, and all that on a raw food diet, and particularly to consume, beans and grains and kale and spinach and thyme. You can eat them raw, you can, but it's certainly a little more palatable and a little more comfortable to steam them and have them mixed in with soup. And so I took that plunge when I was 32 and a half years old, and it didn't really make any difference in my physiology. And the only thing that I think changed from me is that for 32 and a half years, every day I would have essentially the same kind of meals every day, and I'd look forward to a big salad at night and with some avocado or maybe some nuts afterwards, and that was fine. Now, having crossed that threshold, if I don't have a baked potato or a yam or some steamed vegetables or split pea soup or something, I'm hungry. Not that I'm going to die. I just kind of changed my what I enjoy and what satisfies me. And but I still as I mentioned, I'm 80% of my diet, maybe even 90% of my diet is still raw because breakfast is overnight oatmeal and fruit, lunch is a pita pocket and a salad, and dinner is a big salad again, and then baked potatoes, steamed
All
vegetables,
right,
something.
so let's get into this. First, let's get into your childhood because this is so amazing, so amazing. So, growing up as a little baby, did your mother breastfeed you?
Well, that's interesting that you raised that. That's actually where the problem was. Is my parents were when they decided to uh, when they decided to raise my brother and I. They did some pretty heretical things in 1951. They didn't want to give us immunizations. That was kind of crazy. Natural hygiene taught that you build immunity, you don't buy immunity. So they did that. They didn't believe they thought that cow's milk was for cows and goat milk was for goats, and that mother's milk was best. And even that was kind of a crazy idea, like way back when. And they would put so much pressure on my parents to family members, called the health department on my parents. That was a very difficult thing. So my mother had difficulty breastfeeding me. Ultimately, was able to, but it was really challenging in those days. And that's when I came under a care of a natural hygiene doctor and got some raw juices and some soy milk and things like that. Got me through.
Okay, so now is your brother? Is he older or younger than you?
He's older than I am, and he was not raised on raw foods, and so his tastes were oriented in a different direction. So he grew up. In fact, it's kind of interesting. When I grew up, when they raised me on raw fruits and vegetables, my parents were not even living this way. They were vegetarian. They weren't even vegan. My brother was certainly not vegetarian and wasn't vegan. Um, but they raised me that way. And because they loved me and because it's the only thing I knew, I really wasn't a matter of willpower, temptation. This is just kind of what I knew. So I really never had any conflict about being tempted at Thanksgiving or Rosh Hashanah or Passover when everybody else is eating everything else. My doting aunts and uncles would say, "Here, Marky, have this. Don't tell your mom." Had no impact on me
So,
because taste
so
is what we made.
yeah, so as a baby, you don't really have control of what you eat, but now as you getting a little older and you see other kids at birthday parties eating stuff, did you ever get curious or just never?
Oh, interesting. As I look back on it, I'm a little amazed by that. I mean, kids can be cruel, and when I grew up, I was eating rabbit food, and when I was in elementary school, and some teachers and all that. But I guess I like to say I was once on a panel at a conference of the American Natural Hygiene Society with a guy by the name of Bernie Epstein, who's the father of Mark Epstein, who is a treasurer of our health association. And he was raised like me, not raw, but on a pretty much a whole food plant-based diet. And we were on a panel one time talking about raising children hygienically, raising them on a natural hygiene diet. And one of the observations that I made is that I thought one of the key elements to how kids follow what their parents tell them to do in these rebellious times and all that is what kind of a loving family you got. And I had, and I think Mark Epstein had, unqualified love for my parents. And if my parents told me that that eating raw fruits and vegetables was the best diet for me, that was good enough for me. If they told me that, that you judge a person by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, that's the way I was raised because those are the values in which I was raised. So I had a great family. I mean, I had the father knows best kind of family. They were there. They worked 8 to 4, 8 to 5, and we hiked together. We lived together. We
Did,
traveled together. So we had a very loving family. So if they told me this was the right diet, I didn't question that.
did you have a question and say, well, if it's the right diet for me, how come it's not right diet for my brother? Or any
No,
issues like
no,
that?
I
Never?
did not. I did not. I think also part of it is that I think it's maybe I've just been raised as a guy who's always been pretty comfortable in my own skin. So my father used to tell me that my late great father used to say that people will pick on you if you allow them to pick on you. I mean that's too simplistic, but if you allow that to get to you, it will. If you don't, it won't. And if you don't, it often will go away. And I've always been a guy who's been pretty, comfortable in my own skin. I did what I did. I didn't judge what other people did. And so I guess whether it's my views on politics or religion or art or anything else, I'm comfortable with what I believe in, and I believe what I believe is right is right. And obviously, the most interesting thing. So if I grew up in this lifestyle more as a kind of a religion, this is the way I was raised, and this is what I believed, and I trusted it, and that's what it. As I got older, of course, I had the right to reach my own conclusions. And certainly as I got into high school and in the 60s, you're questioning everything, right? Vietnam and civil rights and free love and everything else that happened. But the interesting thing in terms of lifestyle is that as I grew up raised on this diet kind of as a matter of faith, because this is what my parents taught me, and I went to conferences where there were the true believers were there and followed this lifestyle. The interesting thing about the arc of my life is that the principles upon which I was raised in natural hygiene have just continued to be validated every day. The idea that you should eat foods unprocessed is the core of the whole food plant-based health movement, right? The core of what my father had a compost pile and was raising, of growing an organic garden before they had organic standards. Rachel Carson was writing a book. My father was a fan of Rachel Carson way back when, that pesticides are not only a danger to our environment, but they're a danger to our health. So all of these health ideas that I subscribed to and that I followed in my lifestyle became validated. And I found that really rewarding. So I'm a little bit older than Joel Furman and Alan Goldhammer and Frank Sabatino, and even Neil Barnard and these. So, but I've watched these guys, these men and women, validate the principles upon which I was raised, and I find that really rewarding. One little interesting tidbit. When I grew up, oil was not considered a pleasure trap food like salt, oil, and sugar are today. So oil, I mean, that was kind of my salad dressing, that crude sunflower oil and crude safflower oil and olive oil, because it was just considered natural. I mean, an extract of a natural food, and if it was cold pressed and all that. But as we've grown older, we've learned that that there's nothing healthy about it. You're better off eating the olives and the corn and all of that. So that was kind of an evolution for me that and changed my diet. I think we can always try to do better. But the point I'm making, though, is that uh, in response to your question, is that I think I grew up not only having the trust that the diet and the lifestyle in which my parents raised me was the correct one, but it became increasingly validated as I grew up, and that was rewarding and reassuring. And as I say, when I reached 32 and a half years old, part of that same validation was that, yeah, whole foods, raw foods are still great and are nutritionally rich, and they should predominate your diet. But part of the thinking is it wasn't necessary either. You can add to that and still derive great benefits. So that's kind of how I looked at it. So temptation was really never a function with me. And I never really judged what other people did. If people ate a pizza or a hamburger, and I guess I thought about, geez, why are they eating, some other animal's flesh? But it was never to the point where I judged it or was repulsed by it.
Now, as you were growing up and doing this diet, did you ever uh, take any supplements ever?
It's also an interesting thing about evolution. No. So growing up, not a single supplement. Probably in the 70s, the concept of vitamin B12 became a thing within the vegan natural hygiene movement, that it was, and there's a lot of arguments about why that is, why people are more deficient today. And part of the argument has been that, well, we've become such an antiseptic society that we want, instead of just going out to the garden and picking a strawberry and eating it, not worried about whether there's, any dirt and microbiome and microbes from the garden, Well, we don't do that anymore. Everything's washed off and steamed and processed and pasteurized and everything else. So, you know, I do like most vegans do. I test for that, and if my MMA level, B12 level is a little low, which it is sometimes, I supplement with a B12, a vegan B12, and the same thing with vitamin D. I live in the north, and the sun's not always out, and so I test my vitamin D level and um, and again, I think within the vegan movement, those are the two supplements that there's general agreement that you need to at least test your levels, and if you don't, supplement. But I'm generally of the T. Colin Campbell whole school that I believe that if you eat a broad-based, whole food, plant-based diet and the rainbow of all fruits and vegetables and all that, God didn't make too many mistakes, and there's enough there to supply all our nutritional needs. And so those are the only two that I continue to test and supplement for.
Sure. So you answered my other question I was going to ask you is, do you check your blood work over the years? Have
I
you checked
do.
it? So,
I
okay.
do. I have I'm fortunate that there's a lifestyle medicine physician in Youngstown, Ohio, where I happen to live. She's ACLM certified. But I'm also, I mean, Joel Furman's my doctor, Alan Goldhammer's my doctor, Frank Sabatino. So if I need a script for a blood test, I get them, but I have one here locally. So I do have my blood test checked regularly. And now that I'm Medicare age, Medicare pays for it twice a year to get a checkup. So, you know, I don't think, I would just add that I'm not one of these guys that subscribes to the belief that because you follow this lifestyle that you're going to live to like Methuselah, 2,000 years. I believe that, that all of this lifestyle guarantees is that you have the best option. You know, you're hedging your bets. You're making the best with what you got. We're all to some degree prisoners of our heredity, our environment, stresses of life, toxins in the world, and all that. But the choices we make every day about how much sleep we get, what you put on your plate, um, how you keep your emotions in check, those are all things. So I could get a brain tumor tomorrow. I don't think so, but I hope not. I think not. There's a great video on Dr. Alan Goldhammer's website that he has, kind of how do we want to spend the last 10 years. He actually took it from some British health organization or something, and it really shows, you know, how do so many people spend the last 10 years. They're hooked up to IVs, they have Alzheimer's, they have all kind. They're being with IVs on medications and things like that, dialysis. I'm every choice I make every day is, I think, a hedge against that. I do think this lifestyle gives you the right to control your health destiny to a great degree, and that's what I do.
Sure.
Those are the
Speaking about
choices I make.
speaking about some of the things you mentioned, I mean, growing up not eating any cooked food, eating no animals, uh, how was your health and like your sleep pattern compared to your friends? Like the average person might need 8 hours night sleep. Growing up, did you find you needed more or less? And
I can't say that I ever compared that to any of my, but I never did a sleep study of my friends. So I've never was, I don't think I've ever been want for energy. And I guess I'm tend to be a night owl. I'm a multitasker guy. I do a lot of things. I mean, I'm president of the National Health Association. I publish Health Science Magazine, but I'm also have always been one of these public citizens guys. So I'm involved in the community, in our synagogue, and the Jewish Federation, in the community playhouse and legal aid, and I just believe my late great father, raised my brother and I to inspired by the father of public education, Horace Mann, who said, "Be ashamed to die until you've won some victories for humanity." So I've always been kind of involved in trying to win victories for humanity for other people that are maybe not as fortunate. And so I'm a night owl. I tend to work at night. Just personally, if I go to bed before midnight, I'll wake up very comfortably in the morning at 6:30, no matter what, 7 o'clock. If I go right past midnight, like I did last night, because I have an upcoming travel, I was kind of burning the oil. I drag a little bit the next day. It's just a kind of my
Okay,
unique
so you
personality.
would think you need at least 6 hours for yourself
Yeah,
from your own self
yeah.
observation.
Yeah, and I think also, again, I'm not a doctor, I don't play one on TV, but I do believe that if you eat whole natural foods, that's kind of energizing. It provides you the energy of life, and so I don't think it certainly is not as difficult to digest and processed foods and meat and fish and all those sort of other things. But again, that's just personal theory. Maybe wrong, maybe
Well,
right.
even though you like to stay up late, what do you think about the times we eat? Do you are you the type of person that eats whenever you're hungry, or do you have set meal times?
No, there are these people that subscribe to the no breakfast people. I'm a pattern guy. I like my breakfast. I like my lunch. I like my dinner. I'm not too much of a snacker, although I do kind of subscribe to the intermittent fasting, at least from the standpoint of at dinner. I try to be done eating by 6 o'clock at night, so that I really do have time. I find that I sleep better when I do that, particularly if I have a little bit of fruit. Later tonight, I get a snack, and yeah, I want to have a peach, or I want to have a date, or I want to have something like that. That'll give me a much more restless night, more dreams, more kind of agitation than I do if I follow time. I know Joel Furman. Again, it's one of the things we evolve, we learn as the science continues to develop. But that you do really need that intermittent fasting is helpful and gives you a more complete rest. And so I try to get done with dinner at 6 o'clock, but not always possible.
Sure. And what about water? Do you drink? What kind of water do you drink, and how much do you drink?
It's funny. It's really funny. I get that question a lot, and I don't drink water. It's funny. Even when my wife and I hike, she's always insistent. We do a lot of hiking, and she's always insisting I take a water bottle with me. And I hate carrying schlepping a water bottle, especially some of them are a little heavier. And she always has one, and I say okay. But I think for some reason, growing up, when I grew up as a kid, my parents, again, early in this lifestyle, fruit and vegetable juices were a big thing. You had a glass of carrot and celery juice every day. I had orange juice with some ground up almonds for breakfast and all that. So I believe, or my theory is that eating as much whole natural foods as I do, tomatoes and cucumbers and peppers, and there's so much water content in those foods. I really never find myself that thirsty. I go to the gym 3 days a week for heavy weightlifting and that, and I don't even take a water bottle there. I just I have when I'm done, I have a trademark apple that's in my car that I eat an apple on the way home from the gym. That kind of you know nourishes me, refreshes me back, maybe hydrates me back a little bit. But I've never been much of a water drinker. In the house, we have a reverse osmosis system that I cook with, and if I do take a drink, I do that. Obviously, we're learning now about these micro particles that are even in bottled water that we should be avoiding. And so, but that's never been a big issue for me because I don't really drink water, bottled water or otherwise very often. I just don't, never find myself that thirsty.
Yeah. Now, do you buy most of your food from the supermarket, or do you grow any of your food?
My father, as I told you, my father had a compost pile before people knew what that was. In fact, he had two compost piles. His backyard, where I grew up, was it wasn't a backyard. It was two gardens with a path down the middle, right? And these two giant compost piles with a do not disturb sign on them. And one he would work and dig holes around it, and then it would sit and bake. What he would call it would bake for a year till it all breaks down. Then he'd spread it and start a new one. And so I grew up with a garden. I'm a theater major. I was a theater major in college, and one of my favorite musicals that I appeared in and directed was The Fantastics. And there's a song called Plant a Radish, and it says, "A man who plants a garden is a very happy man." And I find I'm Jewish, and I'm president of our synagogue and all that, but I wouldn't describe myself as a guy that gets deep in prayer. I love the culture, I love the liturgy and the music and all that, but my spirituality is when I'm picking a sun gold cherry tomato or a strawberry right out of the garden, and when I'm picking the weeds out and all that. So I have raised beds right now. I have 7 large raised beds in my backyard, and this is the season of cucumbers and tomatoes and peppers and carrots. So I do that, but I also shop, and I shop organically. I've always subscribed to organic foods, and I'm a fan of. I don't know if you're familiar with the Real Organic Project, which is trying to bring organic back to organic, because in the United States, only the United States, we license hydroponics as organic, and they charge a premium, but it's absurd. I mean, organic is about the soil and the microbiome and regenerative agriculture. So I try to buy real organic food wherever I can, and grow my own. And but I'm organic and fresh fruits and
Well,
vegetables.
what do you think? We know in the Bible in Genesis 1:29 it says the food for man is fruits and vegetables. Well, what
Yeah.
do you think when people are eating like the carnivore diet? What do you think about that?
Again, I don't judge. I've always kind of I don't judge people's religion, their politics, or anything else. I mean, I kind of do it by example. The only thing I guess I would tell you personally is that the only thing that I have ever found odd or kind of disturbing in that, or offensive, is when I would watch people roasting a pig on a spit with the head still sitting there. I'm thinking, there's something morbid about this. Or you go to a grocery store, and you don't see it anymore too much, but they would take a live lobster crawling around in a tank, right? And they take it out and they dump it in scalding hot water. I'm thinking, what kind of behavior are we modeling here in America? So I find that, but do I look at somebody eating a hamburger and saying, God Almighty, why are you eating somebody else's flesh? I don't look at it that way. I have to. The only thing I would say about that is that, again, I obviously didn't do fishing. I was never a hunter because that's just something outside of my values and that. But I got to tell you that I've been vegan principally for health reasons. Obviously, as I say, I don't fish, and I've always been sympathetic to the factory farming and animal rights and vivisection, and always been bothered by those sort of things, but I never made them a central part of my personal values or priorities. That changed actually about 5, 6 years ago. A very good friend of mine, a very great friend of mine, Victoria Moran, is one of the champion vegan voices over the last 30, 40 years for Main Street Vegan in New York. Victoria is just a marvelous person. And she produced a documentary called A Prayer for Compassion. And Prayer for Compassion was a documentary where they found people of all different faiths, Buddhists, Catholics, Jews, rabbis, and everybody, leaders of those faiths. And it was about uh, how they found veganism, and how they found inspiration for veganism within their faith. Some Jewish people look at the Old Testament, God shall, I give you these seeds and all that stuff. But anyway, it was a very powerful documentary. And like most vegan documentaries, there are always those kind of obligatory scenes of factory farming, the kill floor of slaughterhouses, mining the ocean floor for lobsters and things like that, and destroying the environment. And I remember after watching it, again, this is 5, 6 years ago. I'm probably maybe 67, 68 years old, been part of this lifestyle my whole life. It was a little aha moment for me. And I said, where do I think the leather wallet that I have in my pocket, where do I think that came from? Was it just some cow that just kind of died of old age, that somebody came along on the road and said, we should do something with his hide? Where do we think we should do with that? Or the same thing, the leather seats in my car. Do you think they just, there was just, again, these were just the gleaners of a factory farm? No, that isn't how it happens. It's a whole industry of critters that are raised so that we can have leather seats and leather wallets and leather jackets and things like that. And I just made a decision that day. I remember calling Victoria Moran after I watched the screening of her documentary. I said, Victoria, I'm going to be in New York City. Where can I find vegan shoes, vegan belt, and things like that? And she told me a place called Moo Shoes in New York, down in the Village. And I went and I did, and I feel great, and I would not buy a leather couch today. I would not buy a leather jacket today. My wife bought a Tesla because before Elon Musk became such a schmuck, she bought a Tesla because you could get it, with non-leather seats. So that's just a personal value that's changed with me. That I'm not going to contribute to that. I'm not on a soapbox. Well, I guess I am on a soapbox here. I'm on your podcast, but I'm not. Um, um, it's just a personal choice that I made. Kind of like I'm a big sports fan, and so everything Cleveland. And for years, the Cleveland Indians, right? And so the Cleveland Indians had Chief Wahoo with the big nose and all that. And I would see these protests every year from indigenous tribes in Ohio saying, this is really this is stereotyping, and we shouldn't have it. And for years I thought, oh, come on, we got bigger fish to fry here. This is not such a big deal. Well, when the Cleveland Indians decided to change their name to the Cleveland Guardians, I thought that was a great thing. I got rid of my Chief Wahoo and my Wahoo emblems, and I retired them, and now I have the big C and CLE. And I think it's a great thing. I think we all need to be more sensitive and more aware. If it were the Cleveland Jews with the Shylock with the big nose and all that, how would I have felt about that? Well, we can all be a little more aware. We can all be a little more sensitive. I think the
But
world
how
needs
do you
to
feel
us.
from a personal level? Like, let's say when you go to the synagogue and stuff. I mean, health, you want people to be healthy, but like when you see people literally knowingly killing themselves, like you're not judging them to knock them down. But
Sure.
do you feel like, hey, I got to talk to my rabbi and tell him, look, that's bad?
No,
You don't say anything unless they ask you.
that's exactly right. My late great mother used to say that the toughest people to convince often are those closest to you. It's heartbreaking because if somebody has breast cancer, they're immediately going to go and get radiation and chemotherapy rather than maybe trying a water fast or maybe changing their diet. Same thing with we know today high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, all of these things will reverse on a whole food plant based diet. But, again, what's that secret sauce that gets some people to change and some people don't? It can be heartbreaking. My father-in-law just passed away with dementia and a bunch of things. It's sad to see it, but again, you can't. I go through life by example. People ask me if somebody asks me to appear on a podcast, I'll talk to them all day long about what I think about diet and lifestyle and ethics and morality and veganism and all that. But if they don't, I'll talk to them about about the latest production of the producers in New York or the Olympics that are going on and stuff like that. I don't judge. It's just
Sure.
not. When if somebody asks, I'll talk to them all day long and I'll thrill. That's why I guess I derive such satisfaction leading the National Health Association. And we have our annual health conference this year. We had 370 people came together in Cleveland sharing the joy of this lifestyle. 370 people eating whole food, plant-based, SOS free buffet meals. It was a great time. But I wasn't on the street or I wasn't picketing Wendy's, although I was tempted to sometimes, or Chick-fil-A when the lines are, around the building. And what are you thinking?
Well,
But
what about your spouse? How does she eat?
so my wife Wanda, we were married when we lived 20 years. I would say the first 20 years she was she was vegan. She became vegan because she was kind of oriented that way. But it was I would call her a junk food vegan. Amy's pot pies and
Sure.
soy milk and soy cheese and all those sort of things. So as we've learned, it isn't um, being vegan or even plant based isn't healthy. Potato chips are plant based. Beer is for hops. I mean, I guess if you want to think about it that way. So for 20 years, everybody's on their path. Not many people were raised like me from day one, where you don't have willpower, you don't have conflicts, you don't have the pleasure trap, you don't have things like that. Don't have a great family like I had. But uh, it's what am I going to say? It's I don't judge. I listen to what I set an example. And if people are willing to, if people are interested in what I have to say, I'll talk to them all day long. If not, that's okay.
But so how does she eat now?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, I must be my dementia coming on. No, you'd asked me about Wanda. So Wanda was 20 years that way.
I rebuke that,
Coming
by the way. I
coming to
rebuke
our
that. I
conferences.
rebuke that, by the way. You don't, it's not your dementia. I rebuke that. I know you were kidding, but I rebuke those words.
And no, so anyway, so about 20 years in, she worked a high stress job for an insurance company, was surviving on organic coffee and sulfite free organic wine and all that, and Amy's pot pies. It was still vegan, but she had put on probably 50 pounds more than she ever had in her life. And one day in 2011, I believe it was, she called Dr. Alan Goldhammer at the True North Health Center and said, Alan, I'm sick and tired to be sick and tired, and I got to do something here. And she'd been to True North before, but just wasn't ready. Came out there, he said, get a one-way ticket. And she got a one-way ticket, came out to True North, did a water fast for 19 days where she reset her palate and her pleasure trap, learned to exercise, at least learned the importance of exercise, learned the importance of being salt, oil, and sugar-free, getting out of escaping the pleasure trap. Called me before she came home and said, I want the pantry cleaned out. I don't want to see the Keurig. I don't want to see the wine. I don't want to see any of that. And I said, that was great. I love it. I mean, again, I didn't feel the right. I loved Wanda because of Wanda, not because she was vegan. But when she came home and she asked me to empty the pantry and all that and join me in this lifestyle, it was like dying and going to heaven. So she never has looked back. She lost that 50 pounds she never wanted, never had, and she's become an exercise enthusiast. And the fact that we can now share this lifestyle together is pretty special.
Wonderful, wonderful. What about children? Do you have children?
I do. So we have yours, mine, and theirs. I have a daughter of Lisa of my first marriage who was raised as a vegan, still a vegan, but kind of more of a junk food vegan, but knows what to do when she gets sick and all that. She works in was working in D.C. now working in Baltimore at a Hillel, and I have a daughter Heather who's the daughter of my wife Wanda of her prior marriage. I ended up adopting her, and then just when we thought we were done, we raised my niece from when she was like 10 years old. And she's now married and we have two grandchildren with her. So we have yours, mine, and theirs. Wanda and I never had a child together, but we have a pretty rich life and three rich children. But they don't, only Lisa follows uh, a plant-based diet. My other two children do not.
Okay. Well, as
But
for
they're
the
great,
diet, what?
but they're great kids.
Yeah, sure, sure. As for the diet,
More life than fruits and vegetables.
I was gonna ask you about essential fatty acids. What has been your experience personally? Do you get tested for that? Do you think it's necessary?
Don't worry about it. I don't worry about it. I
Okay.
don't. I have a general, comprehensive blood panel that's done once a year, and it's pretty good, as well as a fatty acid profile and B12, vitamin D, all that. Everything's PSA, all that stuff's normal.
And you said you exercised 3 days a week at the gym,
Religiously, religiously.
and you're out in the garden all day working in the garden.
Well, I wouldn't say all day, but the thing about raised beds is that you do your work when you put them in, and then once you're done, it's just kind of the pleasure of picking.
Sure. And can you run us through your daily day? I know some days things change when you got events, but your daily day, what's your average diet like? What
You
time do
know,
you get up and what do you eat?
one of my favorite dietitians and people in the lifestyle medicine, natural hygiene space is Jeff Novick. And Jeff likes to say that, for all the books out there and all the recipe books and all that, there's usually about 7 things that people eat every day. And it's kind of like, they get what they like and that's what they do. So for Mark Huberman, it's pretty patterned. And so as I mentioned, I'm an overnight oatmeal guy because I can make 4 or 5 at a time and leave it there and have it every morning and warm it up or even eat it cold. A piece of fruit and all that kind of stuff. So that's my breakfast. Lunch is, as I say, a pita pocket with avocado and hummus and that kind of stuff in it. Maybe I make the best SOS-free cookies in the world, and I'll have a cookie as a little dessert or a manna bread. And dinner is a big salad: baked potatoes, steamed vegetables, rice. And if my wife gets creative, making a lasagna or a stuffed pepper, things like that. It's all great, but it's pretty simple. Pretty simple.
Pretty simple. Yeah. And that's great. That's great. So what's your plans? You just keep promoting this diet through your events and just live
I
your
do.
life and be
So,
happy.
I've been in this, I've been on the board. I became a board member of the American Natural Hygiene Society, now called the National Health Association, when I was 18 years old. I've been in and out of the presidency most of my adult life. And so I find championing this lifestyle pretty rewarding. I publish a magazine you may have seen called Health Science Magazine. It's a membership publication. It's a benefit of membership in the National Health Association. It's only 35 bucks a year. It's a 40-page magazine that comes out quarterly, and it's pretty unique because in this space, most vegetarian magazines or that you look at are mostly recipe magazines and not particularly healthy magazines, or they just promote supplements or potions or powders or pills or things like that. Health Science Magazine is 40 pages long, has no advertising in it, just interviews with some of the leading voices of our health movement, Michael Greger, Michael Clapper, Neil Barnard, people like that. Feature articles on plant-based living. There's recipes in it, but it's all, kind of the champions of the SOS-free chefs like Chef AJ and Kathy Fisher and Brittany Giroudi and Dylan Holmes. So we'll have, a recipe, seasonal recipes in there. We have member spotlights, testimonials, things like that. So this magazine I find uh, is can be very supportive of this lifestyle. It's connected. A lot of people that live this lifestyle can be pretty lonely. I often say you don't get when you live this lifestyle, you don't get invited out to dinner a lot, nor do you go to a lot of people's home for dinner a lot. You're really lucky when you have people, a handful of people in your community that do it. So one of the things that I think, as I mentioned, that I find so personally rewarding and personally satisfying is that when we hold our annual health conferences around the country and we drive 360, 370 people to come together for a weekend of food and fellowship and all that, that's pretty rewarding and helps really recharge your battery. And getting the magazine quarterly again tells you you're not alone in this movement and arms you with the latest, evidence-based science about, gee, shouldn't you really have uh, uh, extra virgin olive oil? Isn't that the newest tonic that you should have? The secret to the Mediterranean diet, or shouldn't you have uh, get shouldn't you be taking DHA or shouldn't you be taking this or not? Our magazine, kind of helps you sift through that, the latest evidence-based knowledge about that. So it supports this lifestyle.
Sure. Now, speaking of being social and so on, there's only like one or two places, if I did eat out, which I don't, if I did, that I would even feel good about going there or trusting. Over the years, I mean, do you find yourself, whether it's your wife or other friends, do you go out? And if you did, like, do you have select places you go to, or do you just go there and tell
It's
them what
few
you
and
want?
far in between. Maybe the biggest gripe that I've had growing up as a raw food vegan for 32 and a half years and as a mostly raw food vegan even for the other 40 some years of my life. So the biggest frustration is when you go to a vegan restaurant, there's often nothing for me to eat. What I want is a salad. So my preferred place to go if I gotta go is the Whole Foods salad bar because I can build my own salad and I can eat to my heart's content. That's not the case with most vegan restaurants. They have all kinds of gourmet sort of things, but salads are not what they're known for. So I can't say that we go out a lot because there aren't a lot of places that will give me what I would want. Obviously, when you're in New York or LA or a few places, you'll find an oasis in the desert, but not many. Even some of the most prominent vegan restaurants, I mean, you have them in Florida and all that, and Miami and all that, but they're not where I get a meal. So
Yeah.
I prefer when we travel, we always try to get a residence inn or something with a kitchen. That's what we do. Maybe the most exciting thing that where again I feel like I died and went to heaven is that within the National Health Association, back in 2019, we did an experiment of launching plant-based travel, where we took 60 people, went from Frankfurt, Germany to Amsterdam. We used Avalon Waterways at that time, and we convinced the cruise line to provide us, separate dining that would be whole food, plant-based, SOS free. And they did a reasonably good
Wow.
job, but it was just too much for them. It's not what they wanted to do. But after that, and then COVID hit. so we couldn't, kind of repeat it. But we launched a partnership with Windstar Cruise Lines, one of the larger cruise lines out there, like Viking and all that. And we have, it's just amazing. We've gone this past October, we went to Greece. We were supposed to go to Greece and Israel, but it was after October 7th. We wound up just in Greece, in the Greek islands. We went to Costa Rica and the Panama Canal with them in February. Um, we went to Tuscany. We went to Barcelona, and then in May we're taking 4 groups of 40 each to Iceland in October, taking 300 people to Tahiti in February 2025, and all of the meals are whole food, plant-based,
Wow.
SOS free.
Wow.
It's an incredible way to travel because, again, if I've done a lot of traveling through the world. It's really difficult to not only language barriers that you have, but exchange and currency and trying to explain that you don't want any salt. You're in Greece and you don't want any oil. You're in Italy, you don't want any oil. Well, you're nuts.
Yeah.
But we've made it so in the National Health Association, we've made it really easy. And then if you look on our website at healthscience.org and look at the plant-based travel tab, you'll see an amazing destinations that we go where you don't have to bring a cooler. You don't have to slip out and try to find a farm market or something. All your meals, you can just really enjoy the wonders of the world. We're even going to, believe it or not, we have on our itinerary in 2025 and 26 South Africa for a safari with World Vegan Travel that's accommodating our lifestyle, and Antarctica we just booked. So go figure that.
Wow. Wow.
It's
So
pretty exciting.
where do people get that information if they want to?
Our website is the same name as our magazine. It's our URL is healthscience.org. Go there,
Healthscience.org.
healthscience.org, and you can join the NHA on that website. You can find out about our plant-based travel. You can learn about our magazine. There's something else, by the way, I always like to do whenever I'm on a podcast. I believe people should look before they leap. The NHA is a 501c3, but I think we really do publish a great magazine. And if people would like to see what Health Science Magazine is really like, if they email me at mhuberman@healthscience.org, mhuberman@healthscience.org, I'll send them a free electronic copy of the latest issue of the magazine. If they like what they see and they want to subscribe, I'll then send them a print copy as long as we still have extra copies in hand. And then they get it. But again, we're all about education. We don't sell anything other than that kind of information and education.
Sure. I'm going to put your email below so people can contact you if they want to
Great.
check out the magazine. Now, what's your personal website if people want to learn more about you?
Healthscience.org.
Healthscience.org.
Healthscience.org. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yep.
wonderful, wonderful. That was great, and that's wonderful what you're doing, and I know it's the right way to go. I mean, this is my story took a little different path because I grew up on a terrible diet, and I got wise, and I'm on similar path now with the diet and understanding like yourself. But uh, it's just a great way to live. And so, is there anything you want to add before we close this interview?
There's a quote that if you don't mind, I'll share with you. Most people think that the whole food plant-based health movement began in, when Forks Over Knives came out in 2011. But there was really an 18th century doctors and pioneers of this movement were talking about health results from healthful living, and that what the elements of health are the same conditions that cause health can lead to disease, and how you recover that. And there were some great authors. And Sylvester Graham is one who everybody knows, was like the
Yes.
graham cracker guy, but he was really a championed father of kind of vegetarianism and temperance movement back then. But there was a guy, an MD by the name of Russell Thacker Troll, and he's really one of my favorites from 1812 to 1877, a prolific writer. Before there was the True North Health Center and Dr. Gold and Dr. Shelton's Health School, Dr. Troll had a health center. He actually graduated MDs. And Dr. Troll had a quote that I really like that I think will speak to you and speak to anybody in this lifestyle. It says, "The system which we endorse and practice is true, in harmony with nature, in accordance with the laws of the vital organism, correct in science, sound in philosophy, in agreement with common sense, successful in results, and a blessing to mankind." That's the lifestyle we live.
There you go. There
It's
you
all
go.
of those things. It's a diet and a lifestyle for all reasons.
Exactly, exactly. Well, common sense today says different, but body sense knows the truth. And
Mother Nature is, that's Colin Campbell was. We were just at the NHA sponsored a wellness weekend at a college called Keoka College on Keoka Lake in the Finger Lakes in upstate New York. And they want to do their first wellness weekend. The president is kind of champions this lifestyle and that. And we went, and T. Colin Campbell, the legendary T. Colin Campbell, was one of their featured speakers because he lives nearby in upstate New York. And he came over and he's 90 years old and he's just amazingly sharp. And he said, kind of his book, "Oh, Mother Nature. Mother Nature knows. We try to outsmart it. We try to outthink it. We try to manipulate it. Mother Nature knows. Didn't make too many mistakes when we were put together, and that you'll find health can be sustained on the diet and listening to your body. It's correct in science and a blessing on mankind.
well, thank you. Thank you, Mark, for taking the time to be on the show.
Sure.
Everybody, if you have any questions, put them below, and we'd love to have Mark back on again in the future. So put those questions below, and we'll ask him some more in the future. And everyone, thank you for watching. I'm going to put his email so you can get that magazine and check it out and consider joining that great organization. And also, I'm going to put his website again below, so check it out there. And this is just a wonderful interview.
By
Mark,
the way,
thank you.
Paul, I'll add that we have also, in addition to the membership, which is $35 a year, $55 if you live outside the US, we also have a free health science podcast hosted by your fellow Floridian, Dr. Frank Sabatino. And we also have a free health science newsletter. So if you sign up at healthscience.org, that doesn't cost you nothing.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So that's if you subscribe to your website, you're saying?
You can, right at healthscience.org. You can subscribe to our health science newsletter.
Great, great. Well, thank you again. All right. All
My
right,
pleasure,
everybody.
Paul.
Have a great day, everybody. And thanks for watching. Please pass this along to anyone you think that might need it. Thank you.
Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life Health Show. Raw Life, brighten up your life.